Welcome to our session. Good morning and welcome to our session titled Coaching Teachers to Deeper Learning, Deeper Learning Instructional Practices Using the 4 Shifts Protocol. I'd like to take a moment and introduce you to our CKEC Deeper Learning team. My name is Amanda Burrows, and I am the Deeper Learning Coordinator here at CKEC. And presenting with me today will be Holly Lawrence, one of our Deeper Learning consultants. She has a background teaching middle school math. Rounding out our team is Erin McIver. She's one of our Deeper Learning consultants. She will not be presenting with us today, but she's listening to us. She's sitting right behind us in the office working on a presentation for tomorrow. So I see some of her friends on here, and I wanted you to know she is with us and she knows you're here. Our team came on board at CKEC in July of 2022 as part of a statewide Deeper Learning grant to support deeper learning initiatives across Kentucky. And we work with 23 Central Kentucky school districts as they work to create meaningful, engaging, authentic learning experiences for students. If you'd like to learn more about Kentucky's vision for deeper learning, you can do this several ways today. One of the sessions I'd like to promote is actually following us, and it's a team from Western Kentucky Educational Cooperative presenting in the same room from 11:20 to 12:30, and their topic is Dive into Deeper Learning. This is going to be Abby Griffey and Shannon Solomon, and they're going to talk about the what and why for deeper learning in Kentucky. So we chose to focus more on a tool today, but if you want to know more about this grant and the work that's happening in Kentucky, I definitely join them. As we're looking at the grid for today, there are a lot of deeper learning sessions, so I hope that will at least pique your interest and you can hop on some others today. I wanted to tell you also about our website. So you'll see the bit.ly link at the bottom of this screen where you can check out our CKEC Deeper Learning website. There are a lot of resources on this site. One of the resources are some snapshots that we've created with deeper learning topics. And these are one-pagers that you can print with QR codes and you can share with teachers on all kinds of different deeper learning topics. We've got some on visible learning strategies and just what is deeper learning and equity and community partnerships. So hopefully you'll check those out. We also have developed several on-demand professional learning modules. So if you have teachers in your building who are looking for some professional development hours, anyone in the state can complete these and they're issued a certificate at the end of the module. We've got PD opportunities that CKEC districts can participate, and you can just go right to the site and sign up for those opportunities, and then some other deeper learning resources that we think have been helpful to our districts on that page. I wanted to make sure I told you about that. And then I also want to talk about my background and why I think this tool might be helpful to you. So before transitioning to my current role, I was an assistant principal at Scott County High School in Georgetown, and I was in charge of a lot of the curriculum, assessment, instruction. I was in charge of evaluating 12 teachers and coaching and mentoring all of our first year teachers. And last year we had 12. So I was always looking for good coaching tools and resources to help them with instruction. So the protocol that we're sharing with you today is a great tool for supporting teachers as they design and redesign effective instruction.
And the resource that guided us for this presentation is Harnessing Technology for Deeper Learning by Scott McLeod and Julie Graber. In this book, McLeod and Graber begin by exploring the existing models for technology integration, and they introduce the 4 Shifts protocol. So on the left of this slide, you see the chapter titles. And one of the most beneficial parts that I thought of this book was the lesson redesigns found in chapters 3 and 4. And those kind of walk through existing lessons that you see in classrooms and how to shift those using that 4 shifts model to focus more towards deeper learning. So what is the 4 shifts protocol? It is a discussion protocol and coaching tool that encourages educators to think critically and purposefully about instructional redesign goals and technology integration in classroom. The 4 Shifts protocol is broken down into 4 sections, and those sections are deeper thinking and learning, authentic work, student agency and personalization, and technology infusion. It's important to note that the authors state that the protocol should never be used as an evaluation tool and should instead be used to collaborate with educators to refine instruction. So the infographic here breaks those 4 main sections into smaller parts. So as you look at this, we want you to think about your school and what strengths are found in your school. So these can be section headers or one of the subtopics. We want you to take a moment and open up the chat, and in the chat, type in either a section header or a subtopic that you think your school does very well. So what are your school's strengths? So I see technology infusion in the chat. Good. Student agency and personalization, awesome. The tech part. Good. Collaboration, communication, critical thinking. So keep putting those strengths in the chat. And when you think about looking at this and self-assessing on what your strengths are, that can help guide you. So if it's one of those subtopics, for example, if learning goals is what you feel like your school does really well, that tells you that you've got your first step towards redesigning focused on student agency and personalization. So as you go through that, this can help guide which part of the 4 shifts protocol you might want to focus on with your school. So now you don't have to type this in the chat, but think about what your school's area of growth is. And as you think about your school's area of growth, look through those responses up above and see if there's anyone who has responded that that is a strength of theirs. So that can give you someone to reach out to for advice and collaboration on how to address that in your own building. Let's take a moment and consider that area of growth. Maybe jot down the name of someone who says that they do that really well, and then you have some people to connect with. And so one thing I noticed in the chat is that a lot of people said technology infusion is really something that's going really well at their school. So the next thing we want to talk about is how is the 4 shifts protocol different than the SAMR model? So the SAMR model is the most prevalent model of technology integration in elementary and secondary schools. And so it begins at the bottom with substitution, where the technology is a direct substitute for instructional activities, and there's no functional change to what's happening in the classroom. At the top, you have redefinition, where students are using technology to create new tasks and products. So SAMR and other models provide a mental model of technology integration, but they don't give a lot of guidance on how to move between the categories. McLeod and Graber reported in the book, we realized very quickly that a lesson could be high on the SAMR levels, but still have students engaging in low-level factual recall and procedural regurgitation. The 4-shift protocol provides specific areas of focus to improve access to higher order thinking and technology integration in classroom lessons.
Okay, so now it's time to take a look at the protocol. And this slide actually shows screenshots of each of the 4 sections of the 4 shifts protocol. And each section in the protocol includes more specific areas of focus or subcategories that you're noticing there in bold, and questions to think about related to that area. So when using the protocol, it's recommended that your focus should be on a few questions from a particular section at a time. This can be a very overwhelming tool if you hand this, especially to a new teacher, and say, we want you doing all of these things. That's not the goal of this protocol. And so it's not to be used with not every question is going to be used for every lesson and every unit. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to take care of this next task so you have access to all of our resources from today. We've created a folder of resources for you, including a PDF and Google Sheets version of the protocol and the questions that it includes. So you'll see that bit.ly link for the folder shown in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. And I actually want to give you a minute to either type that into your browser and make sure you can access that link, or write it down so you can access it later. This is also going to give you access to today's slides in that folder. So if this is something that you want to explore with more of your leadership team or instructional coaches, you'll have access to these slides and you're welcome to use those. I will also add, before I click to the next slide, that we did these slides in Canva, and so you're going to get a viewable link of those slides. But if there's anything that you actually want to use and you want to have an editable version, just email us. Our emails are on that second slide where we introduced ourselves. Give us an email and we will be happy to share something with you that you can edit. Okay, so Section A is a great place to start when designing lessons for deeper learning using the 4 shifts protocol. So we're going to start by talking about Section A, but before we do that, I really want to talk about the correlation between the deeper learning competencies and this protocol, and it's part of what caught our attention when we were learning about this tool. So the questions in Section A align quite nicely with the deeper learning competencies developed by the Hewlett Foundation that you see on the left side of the screen. And so just take a minute and look at that graphic. You'll see at the top in the blue hexagon, mastering core academic content, critical thinking and problem solving, effective communication, learning how to learn, developing academic mindsets, and collaboration. And many of your districts probably have a profile of a graduate or portrait of a graduate or profile of a learner, or you might call it something very specific to your district, like a portrait of a patriot. And you'll notice some alignment in these competencies as well. So this might be a tool that you think about when you're aligning with coaching teachers to reach those competencies with their students. So I'd like you to notice that under the deeper thinking and learning with Section A, in these subcategories, you have domain knowledge, critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, metacognition, and then assessment alignment. And domain knowledge there connects to mastering core academic content on the left. Critical thinking and problem solving are the next 2 subcategories with questions. And you can see that those are listed on the left as deeper learning competencies as well. We think creativity ties into these competencies perfectly. Metacognition addresses academic mindsets and learning how to learn. And so you'll probably notice that the 2 competencies not addressed in Section A are effective communication and collaboration, but you will find these addressed in Section D of the 4 shifts protocol, which is technology integration. But many of you have indicated that that's your school strength, so that's great. We're going to take a closer look at Section A. Section A of the protocol does focus on deep thinking and learning. And so when moving towards deeper learning, schools focus on moving students from doing factual recall, copying notes, procedural regurgitation, and they're trying to move students to engaging in tasks of greater cognitive complexity more often, moving to those upper levels of Bloom's taxonomy or Webb's depths of knowledge. And so I'm going to give you about 30 seconds of quiet time to look at the questions in Section A now. And I want you to think about how you might use those questions in the table to guide your coaching conversations with teachers, or to just discuss instructional strategies or practices with teachers. And I want you to think about which question from section A stands out to you as one you might begin using with teachers in your school. And let's go ahead and you choose that question. If you don't want to type the whole question, it's fine. But I'd like you to type in the chat which question stands out to you as one you might be able to start applying with teachers. If you don't want to type the whole question, you might just type like creativity or critical thinking. But let's see in the chat what we're thinking. So I see lots of critical thinking, metacognition, creativity. So as an evaluator, I don't want to use this as an evaluative tool, right? But if I'm in a third year English classroom observing the teacher's lesson, and we're talking about the lesson later on, and the teacher's really just asking me how she might take that lesson one step further, I might use that metacognition question to say, well, do students have the opportunity to reflect on their planning, their thinking, their work, their progress? Have you thought about ways that you might incorporate this into your class on a daily or weekly structure? And then, that gets the teacher thinking about these topics as well. So you can see over here, we see more problem solving, critical thinking, metacognition, great ways of thinking about that. One tip, this book gives great tips about how to implement this protocol. One tip given in the book is to focus on growth over time and to allow teachers to choose which sections and which questions to work on. So this will allow for greater ownership of the work. So instead of me handing a teacher a section and saying, we're working on this, allow them to choose what they want to work on at a given time. And then that should guide your coaching as well. So let's go ahead and move on to section B. Section B of the protocol focuses on designing opportunities for authentic work in classrooms. And this is one of my favorites as we're working with district teams and teachers. So when moving towards deeper learning, schools look to move from isolated, siloed academic work towards more opportunities for students to engage and contribute to relevant interdisciplinary communities. And so I want you to take a moment, and I'll give about 30 seconds again to look over the questions in section B on authentic work. As I read through these questions, I start automatically thinking about certain classrooms that I'm in where I see this happening authentically, and it's exciting and the students are excited about learning. And then I also am thinking about classrooms where I wish more of this were happening and I could really ask these questions to those teachers. So let's do the same thing on this slide. And in the chat, type the subcategory for which question stands out to you as one you might begin using with teachers in your school. And let's see what you're thinking. The authentic role, authentic assessment. I agree with real or fake, whether it's real or fake. The authentic assessment is the one that I think stands out to me because are students creating real world products or performances for authentic audiences? So are there opportunities for whatever they're creating to go beyond the classroom and beyond the teacher and beyond their peers, and to have a real audience provide feedback and a larger purpose for what they're doing? So I see a lot of you all choosing the same thing. Another tip, you'll see this in the blue box at the bottom. Another tip given in the book is that the most powerful use of the protocol occurs when administrators and teachers move beyond answering the questions in a particular section and begin using the questions to frame their instructional redesign work. So thinking about how we might rewrite a lesson to really create those deeper learning experiences or shift a traditional lesson. I know I saw a session later on that OVEC's going to do. And it's really about shifting from traditional to transitional and then eventually transformational learning experiences. So if this is something that you want to learn more about, you might want to attend that session later on today. I think it's in the same room in the last session. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about section C. And section C of the protocol focuses on student agency and personalization. So deeper learning classrooms work to move from overwhelmingly teacher-controlled learning environments to learning environments that enable greater student agency and ownership. Let's do the same thing on this one. Take a few minutes to read the questions in this section. And then which question in section C stands out as one you might begin using with teachers in your school? So let's go ahead and throw those topics or subcategories into the chat so we can take a look at how we compare to other schools. I'm seeing overwhelmingly the talk time. I'm going to be honest with you and tell you that reflecting on my own self as a teacher, this one's a little bit, it was hard for me. So I would have said that in my classroom that, yes, I had strong learning goals and we had targets and success criteria and students knew what they were learning. But then I look at the question and the question says, who selected what's being learned? My first answer would be the Kentucky Department of Education. I mean, really, you think about it that way and you think it's the standards. But when you're thinking about the learning goals and framing that around the student, we can still use those standards and involve students in that process, right? And then we think about learning activities. Well, in my classroom, I thought I was a pretty strong teacher, but who designed the learning activities? Well, I did. I was the teacher. That was my job, right? But the question is, who selected how it's being learned? And I think back to my time many, many years in the classroom, and I thought, how often did I give my students opportunities to select how they were learning and to personalize the learning, for themselves? As far as talk time during the lesson or unit, who's the primary driver of the talk time? And we think about that and how much a teacher is talking versus how much time the students are talking on topic about the learning. And that's, it's an interesting thing for us as instructional leaders to think about. And I actually had a teacher last year that I worked with, and she wanted me to record how much time her students were talking on task about the topics because they were doing book discussion groups. And so that's literally what I did that day. I wasn't there to evaluate. I was there to collect data for her. And so I would walk around to the tables and I would record how much time they were talking on task about the book. And that was pretty eye-opening for her to see how much of the class she was talking and how much of the class they were talking and working. And so this can be a great tool to get teachers to reflect on that. A tip from the book for this section, you'll see in the bottom corner in the blue, is to include students in the lesson redesign process. So it's okay to ask students questions like, here's how this has been done in the past. So if we wanted it to be like this instead, what might that look like? Or how might we get there? What ideas do you have for making this activity more interesting and more awesome? And I think that sometimes our students will surprise us because they'll have some very creative ideas that might not have come to our mind. And so involving them in the true learning redesign process can be powerful. And finally, we're going to take a look at section D. Section D is on technology infusion, and I was excited to see that many of you said that this was a strength in your school. And I really haven't focused on this a whole lot yet, but I do want to point out that this 4 shifts protocol is actually a technology tool. I found out about it last year when I was the assistant principal at Scott County High School. Our digital learning coach had learned about it because statewide, all the digital learning coaches were talking about this tool. And he brought it to me and shared it with me. And I thought, man, this really would have been helpful in August. And so had I stayed in that position, this would have been a tool that I planned a lot of our professional development around, and I would have used it to coach teachers throughout the school year. So now we're using it here at the co-op. In this section, you'll see communication and collaboration addressed, which link to the other deeper learning competencies from earlier. This section also includes questions to help teachers evaluate if technology is adding value to learning or if it's just being used as a means, not an end, and also helps to reflect on students as digital citizens. And I know a lot of your districts that have those learner profiles, digital citizenship is part of those competencies. So I just want to close on talking about this protocol by saying this can be a powerful tool to evaluate how technology is being used, and it can also foster innovation as teachers self-evaluate and reflect on each question. This section of the protocol specifically might also elicit some professional learning needs in your school or in certain PLCs, or maybe just with specific teachers. For example, the question, are digital technologies being used to facilitate collaborative processes, might lead a teacher to recognize a deficit in the skill. And the teacher might say, I don't know how to use technology as a collaborative tool. And so this might be eye-opening for you as an instructional leader to work with a digital learning coach to teach them about online discussion boards and Padlet and how they might share Google Docs or slides with their students to allow them to collaborate digitally.
So as you're thinking about this could be used in a school, there are many possibilities of how you can implement the 4 shifts protocol within a school. So it's a great tool for supporting and coaching teachers. Professional learning can be planned as several sessions, with each session focused on one section of the protocol. So if you're planning on doing this school-wide, it's suggested that you model the process using an example lesson from outside of your school, and that'll decrease the reflective defensiveness that comes whenever teachers have created the materials. On the next slide, I'm going to show you a resource that you can use to find example lessons to kind of coach through the protocol. And you can use this protocol to ask better questions when you're meeting with teachers if you aren't looking for a school-wide implementation. The protocol is also very effective when it's used as part of the planning process. So teachers can use the questions in the protocol to intentionally design instruction as part of their PLC process. Though the protocol shouldn't be used as an evaluation tool, it can be used for learning walks if the teacher has chosen a section or a few questions that they're working on in their classroom. So those questions can be used to look for evidence of implementation. And for this, it is important that the teacher is receiving feedback on work that they themselves have chosen to focus on. So Amanda gave the example of the teacher wanting to know about talk time and going in and using that as a data collection tool instead of an evaluation tool. So the resource here on the screen is also included in that folder. This is a lesson crosswalk. And so this was something given in the book as something to use. So this has all kinds of different example lessons. And these, I believe, come from the Florida Matrix for Technology Integration. So there are example lessons in there ranging in all the subject areas and all the grade levels that you can use with educators to model the 4 shifts protocol. So you want to use instructional activities from outside of your building. And whenever you're picking lessons, you want to pick lessons that are as close as possible to the group that you're working with. So if you're working with middle school science, you want to try to choose a lesson that goes along with that group. And when you're doing this, you want to focus on one section of the protocol at a time and answer the questions from that section using a sample activity to make sure that everyone is on the same page. And then you'll move on to a new section with a new sample lesson. And finally, we just want to bring you back to that folder that has resources in it. So the bit.ly is on the screen again if you did not catch it earlier. In here, you have our presentation, a link to our presentation from today. You have the Google Sheets and PDF version of that 4 shifts protocol that you can use to start coaching teachers. There is also an overview of the 4 shifts protocol that is from the authors of Harnessing Technology for Deeper Learning. And finally, a link to that lesson crosswalk that you can use to find sample lessons for implementing. So we want to thank you for joining us today to learn about the 4 shifts protocol. Up next, join John Akers in the main room for a conversation about school safety.
Yes, thank you. And we'll be happy to stay on here for just a few extra minutes if anyone has a specific question for us. We hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you, Amanda. It was a great presentation. Enjoyed it.